You're in the middle of an argument, and suddenly one person just stops talking. No shouting, no more words, just silence. And somehow that silence feels louder, heavier, more unsettling than anything that was said before it. If you've ever noticed that the quiet moments in a conflict hit harder than the actual words, this isn't your imagination. There's a very specific psychological reason behind it. And today, we're going to break it down. Let's start with something most people don't consciously realize. Words, even harsh ones, give you information. You know exactly what the other person is thinking. You know where you stand. You can respond, defend, explain, or push back. But silence gives you nothing. Your brain doesn't have a clear signal to respond to. So it does something automatic. It starts filling in the blanks itself. Is this person furious? Are they done with the conversation? Are they done with you? Are they thinking of the worst possible version of what just happened? In the absence of information, the brain doesn't default to calm, neutral explanations. It defaults to worst-case scenarios. Because from a survival standpoint, assuming the worst and being wrong feels safer than assuming the best and being caught off guard. This is why silence during conflict often feels more threatening than actual words. Your mind isn't just sitting in quiet. It's actively spiraling, trying to predict what that silence means. There's another layer to this that goes even deeper. Silence can feel like a form of punishment, even when it isn't intended that way. Think about early relationships. A parent who goes quiet instead of explaining what's wrong. A partner who shuts down instead of communicating. In many of these situations, silence isn't neutral. It's used, consciously or not, as a way to express anger without saying a word. So your nervous system learns, early on, to associate silence with something being seriously wrong. Not just, we're pausing to think, but something bad is happening, and I don't know what it is yet. That association doesn't disappear in adulthood. It gets carried forward. So even in an argument that isn't destructive, isn't cruel, isn't even that serious, the moment silence enters the room, old alarm bells start ringing. Here's something important to understand about silence in an argument. It doesn't always mean what you assume it means. Sometimes silence means someone is overwhelmed and needs a moment to organize their thoughts. Sometimes it means someone is trying not to say something they'll regret. Sometimes it simply means someone has run out of words in that specific moment. But because silence feels so uncomfortable, the person on the receiving end often rushes to fill it. More explaining, more justifying, more talking, trying to force some kind of response, any response, just to end the unbearable quiet. Ironically, this can escalate the exact tension both people are trying to avoid. One person goes quiet to calm down, and the other person keeps talking, because the silence feels unbearable, and now there's a mismatch, where one is trying to de-escalate and the other feels like they're being ignored. There's also a very different version of silence worth naming here. The kind used deliberately as a form of control, where someone goes quiet specifically to make the other person feel anxious, guilty, or desperate for resolution. This is different from someone needing space to think. This is silence used strategically to create discomfort on purpose. Learning to tell these apart matters, because the response to each is completely different. If silence is genuinely about needing space, rushing in with more words usually makes things worse. But if silence is being used to punish or manipulate, staying silent yourself and simply not chasing the reaction can be the healthier response. So, how do you actually navigate this? The first step is recognizing what's happening in your own body when silence shows up. Notice the urge to panic, to fill the space, to over-explain. Just naming that reaction internally gives you a small pause before reacting automatically. The second step is asking a direct, low-pressure question instead of guessing. Something like, are you needing a moment, or is there something you want to say? This replaces assumption with actual information, which is often exactly what your brain was missing in the first place. The third step is allowing silence to simply exist sometimes without treating it as an emergency. Not every pause in conversation needs to be immediately explained or fixed. Some silence is just processing, not rejection. If silence in conflict has always felt unbearable to you, it likely comes from somewhere real. Maybe an environment where quiet used to signal something dangerous or unresolved. But not every silence today carries that same weight, and learning to sit with it, instead of fearing it, is part of learning to handle conflict without letting the worst case story in your head take over. If this made you think of an argument where silence said more than words did, let me know in the comments. And don't miss the next video.